all of these within kind of the same direction. So, talk to us about your law beginnings. What made you decide to want to be an attorney, and then tell us about your law school experience.
I wanted to be an attorney when my dad and I went to hear a lecture and there was a lawyer speaking. And I was just impressed. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a lawyer. I want people to listen when, when I talk. So I wanted to be a lawyer from that time. And I kind of followed that trajectory.
And tell us about law school.
I went to UNC Greensboro undergrad and then went to Carolina for law school. First year was very challenging. I remember being in some 1L classes and getting called on with the Socratic method and feeling like I just did not know what I was talking about. And after that class, I went to talk to the professor and said, maybe I don't need to do law. He said, why don't we wait a little while and give it give it a chance. And when I was graduating and was inducted into the Davis Society and some other special things, that same professor said, you still think you're not supposed to be a lawyer? Oh, no, I know I'm supposed to be a lawyer now. So that was good.
And what year was that you graduated law school?
1992.
Okay, so 1992. So then graduating law school in 92. Take us on your career path from there.
I went to work at the DA's office. I had worked at the DA's office. I think I was probably one of the first people to work under the clerk program. That's really a volunteer program. And I had sent a letter to Colin, then the DA, and Howard Cummings, who was his first assistant, wrote me back and said, we don't have any paid positions. I said, I'll work for free. He said, then you can work. And I would go and work in the morning and work there till lunchtime. And then in the afternoon, I needed to make some money. So I had two jobs. I'd work 3 days a week at Winn-Dixie, which was in Garner at the time, checking out groceries. And the other days work at the Sheraton over by Crabtree, managing the restaurant. So I was busy. And I parked at a friend's house so I could ride the bus because I didn't have any money to park downtown. So.
Wow. So from there, and working for free, and then tell us about your first job in law.
It was at the DA's office, but you don't get an offer until you pass the bar. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but I passed the bar. Started out in traffic court, like everybody, and moved up fairly quickly. It was unusual. I think a lot of it had to do with some of the movement of people either moving up or moving out. So left traffic court and I think I went from traffic court to PUBA, the person that's over the district court DAs. Now I went to misdemeanor appeals, which was jury trials, not complicated jury trials, but jury trials, assault on a female, DWIs, anything that got appealed from district court for a jury trial. Did those for a while. And then I moved to the drug unit. And I was in the drug unit and had just gotten my first murder case when Charles Francis came to talk to me one day, and he said, can I talk to you? And I said, if you can talk while I eat, because the life of a DA is you're busy. You don't have a lot of luxury time. And he started telling me about his firm. And I said, are you offering me a job? And he said, are you interested? I said, I'm interested. And I went there and worked there for about 3 or 4 years. And then I went to Patterson-Dilthey, which was the big Patterson-Dilthey, big firm, and did insurance defense for the bulk of my career. And then the firm had a split and went in different directions. And I stayed with the variation of the smaller firm for a little while. And I ended my private practice career at Gaylord Rogers with two friends who I knew from many years. And then I had wanted to be a judge. I had been nominated by my peers several times to be considered by the governor, but hadn't got the appointment. And a friend told me about a new position. There were 3 new positions coming online. 2 were one was in Knightdale, which is where I live, Southeast Raleigh, where I grew up. Wendell, that area, and some were over in Cary and Holly Springs. And so I ran for judge and won. I had a contested primary, but once I won the primary, I didn't have any opposition in November. And I've been reelected one time, so I'm in that second term, and we'll go from there.
Talk about that change from the practice of law, and then you kind of had to do some politics. Talk about that adjustment?
Well, you do have to do, it's funny because to get elected, you have to do some politics, but once you become a judge, you got to put politics aside. That's a tough tightrope to walk. You still have, because we're elected, you have to appear at different things, and you certainly want to appear, and there's politics involved with that. But you also have to walk the line of not taking certain positions, because judges doesn't have a position when you're hearing a case. Even if you have a position as a human being, you don't have a position when you're hearing a case. And so it's just a fine line to walk. And so you're constantly thinking about what you need to say, and you feel like in some regards you're always on. Even on the weekend when you're someplace, you got to think about, where am I? What's going on? So that can be hard, but I thoroughly enjoy the work.
Tell us about you. You took us through your career. Tell us about the importance of mentorship in your career and your mentors as you started out, and then now you having mentees.
Well, having is critical. Mentors are huge because they help you. They help you to understand what to do. Because when you're a new lawyer, yes, we know some law, but the day-to-day practice, and particularly thinking about professionalism, how to treat other lawyers, what you should consider. I'd say this is a great example. I think there are times when you have a lawyer that may miss a deadline, and you say, of course you got to talk to your client, but you got to know that maybe sometime you're going to be in that position and miss a deadline. And so you've got to see if you can extend some courtesy to your opposing counsel without risking your client's position, but extend some courtesy to opposing counsel. You got to learn that cases are not the end all be all. Yes, you fight hard in cases, and I fight as hard as anybody when I was a lawyer and a litigator. But at the end of the day, you all can go to lunch, and that's professionalism, to be able to understand this is what we're doing in the courtroom. This is not who we are. So I think that's critical, particularly for young lawyers. I think it's hard. You want to take positions that, particularly if a client is present, that puts more pressure. I had individual clients, and then I had corporate clients. Both want to make sure you're handling their case in the way that they think you should handle it. But I would always talk to my clients about, I don't think we need to be nasty about this position. I don't think we need to take a hard position about this. Let's fight about the things we need to fight about, and not fight about the things that we don't have to fight about.
Relating to mentorship, collegiality, and we see that collegiality that you all have on the bench. Tell us about that.
Well, we help each other. I mean, new things. You'd be surprised when you become a judge. That doesn't make you all knowing of every point of law. Sometimes there's some very novel concepts that come up, or some novel issues that come up, and so we talk among ourselves about, well, how would you handle this, or what do you think, and get each other's opinion. And I think that's just a good thing to do in the bar as well. Although certainly you have to bear in mind client confidentiality, and we have to bear in mind not giving the details of a case, not so much with our fellow judges, but outside of that, just being able to run a fact pattern by somebody, or what do you think about this, or this is what I'm thinking about doing, and hearing some feedback from somebody else. I think that's really an important feature of being a professional, being able to talk to other professionals and find out what they think.
Yeah. And you've had your career through North Carolina and Wake County, and describe the change in the legal landscape here in our state and in our county, 1992 through now, through your career.
Well, other than at the DA's office, when I was practicing after I left the DA's office, I actually was out of Wake County more than I was in Wake County. And so I would go to all manner of small towns. I would be in Henderson, I'd be in Wilson, I'd be in Rocky Mount. I was traveling, and what I found important was to get to know people and to be just polite. You'd be surprised, saying good morning to a trial court administrator who has a lot of power in terms of setting schedules and doing things works wonders. And I think sometimes when lawyers become lawyers, they get the big head, as I would say, and think, I went to law school, I know everything. You'd be surprised. Clerks, wonderful. Trial court administrators, wonderful. Court reporters, wonderful. Understanding that we need everybody in the legal profession, and it's really important for us to respect everybody and not think that we know it all.
And how have things changed for lawyers and judges through the years? Like, that you've seen something like technology or
Technology
anything?
has been huge. People were not using videos and AI. There was no AI out there. Everybody had their notebooks. They still bring their notebooks, especially in family court, which I did for the first few years on the bench. But they now use a lot more technology to present their cases, and you got to stay up on the technology and how it works. And I think you have to be careful because there's a lot more that's preserved forever. And so you have to make sure you intend to say what you said. And I'm always mindful when I'm on the record. Because sometimes everything you think you don't want to let pass through your lips.
And how did you like through all those changes and all of that time in court and your time at the firm and all of those things through your career, how did you manage the caseload, the workload?
Not requiring a lot of sleep. Getting up really early. I might be up at 4:30. That's kind of typical for me, but then I kind of crash by about 9:30 or 10. Just working hard, getting people to understanding that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. There were people who had done what I was doing before me, talking to them, what worked for you. How did you find keeping up? Billable hours was a novel concept because as a DA, you're just worried about doing your work and managing your cases. And the first firm I went to was a plaintiff's firm, and so primarily a plaintiff's firm. We did have some hourly bill clients, but you're not so much worried about hours. You're worried about getting the work done. So when I went to a firm where you've got to keep up with every bit of time, that was an adjustment. And trying to write down everything, and probably initially I was writing off too much. And my colleagues would say, well, you were here all day. Why do you only have X number of hours? And I start talking to them about what I did, and they're looking at, well, you don't have all of that on the timesheet. I said, well, I didn't think we should build a client for that. Or I thought this was more administrative. So just learning what you want to do and how you want to do it. I didn't love billing my time. That was probably my least favorite part in the private practice of law, keeping up with every second. It was more important to me to do the work, but that's how we got paid. So you had to do that as well.
And so, talking about managing all of that in your work life, take us outside the law for you as not as Judge Bell, but as Julie Bell in your life outside the law. Tell us about that and talk about its importance.
Well, it's hugely important. I'm not married. I wanted to be a parent, and so I considered my options, and you have options, and ultimately I decided to go with adoption. And I got qualified through an agency and was waiting for a match. And then I would call it a God moment. My neighbor across the street at the time was taking some classes at Wake Tech, and she was in a class with a girl who was lamenting her friend being pregnant with her seventh child, not married, worried about what to do, and connected us. And about a couple of days later, I was present in the OR when a 9-pound, 3-ounce baby girl was born. That most adoptive moms don't get that. And that was huge. My daughter is now just graduated from college. So I've been there, and it was important to me to be a very present mom. I volunteered at school, and so I just worked it out. You had to be very organized, and I'd set my days. I'd tell them at school, I can't come to a bunch of meetings, but if you need me to show up and do an event, you need me to show up and chaperone a field trip, I will do that. But I can't come to a lot of meetings. I can tell you when I'm available, and I will be there. Okay, and they appreciated the consistency, so that was hugely important. I also am a minister. I'm an ordained minister. I went to divinity school and before my daughter was born, and I am an assistant minister at my church, and so I have a lot of responsibilities at my church that keep me pretty busy.
And why is it important for lawyers to have that family life and that outside organizations. Why is that important?
It's important because so you don't get consumed by the law. So you get a break and you get to do the fun things. You go to the park and you go, you just do things that make your heart smile. And I think sometimes as lawyers, we get so caught up with, and it's a good break just to do something without worrying about what everybody thinks about it. And then your faith is important. It's important to me. I know everybody has different faith, and I respect everybody's right to have different faith or no faith, as the case may be, but it's important to me because that's my strength. And that's how I do what I do.
And I've heard, you often hear the idiom, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I think that kind of falls on judges a bit. Heavy is, or the shoulders that wear the robe. And talk about when you got on the bench, were you perceived differently? Were things different? Like, how was that? Was that an adjustment?
I think there were some adjustments. There certainly were friends that I had for years who we still remain friends. And most of them did not appear in front of me, so it wasn't an issue. But people certainly initially treat you very different. And then you have to kind of let them know I'm still who I was. I mean, we can't talk about cases, and we can't talk about what my view on something is, but we can still talk about dinner and our kids and church and other things. And so I think it's important to separate those things and keep them separate when you can, although sometimes they overlap.
Tell us about where do you see the future of the profession going? In Wake County, in North Carolina in general, where do you see the legal community headed in the next 10, 20 years?
I feel like AI is going to be huge. I think we're going to be using a lot more technology, even more than we're using now. I hope we never miss the human component because jurors want to talk to human beings. One of the things that I always found helpful after a trial, win, lose, or draw, was to stay and talk to jurors if they were willing to talk to me, because what lawyers think juries think are important sometimes is correct, and sometimes they're like, no, we decided this because of X, and you're like, wow. And so talking to everyday people. So I hope we never in the technology lose the human component, because that will be key, because there are always going to be times when there's an exception to the rule. There's always going to be a time when somebody, let's say you're in the middle of a case, you're questioning a witness, and the witness has a very emotional reaction. Perhaps as the lawyer, you want to dig in and go ahead and go to the next question. But as a human being, you need to give the person a minute and say, let's go off the record, and give them a minute to compose themselves, because we all have those moments. People have deaths in their family. People have births. People have accidents that happen. People have tragic situations, and they have good situations. And I hope we never lose the human component.
And you've mentioned some things that you would tell younger lawyers. You already told them, but my last question that I want to ask you is, if you could go back in time and give advice to 1992 Julie graduating law school as she's headed into her law career, what would you, as Judge Bell, what advice would you give Julie in 1992?
Give yourself a break. Don't feel like you have to be perfect. Don't hold yourself to even higher standard than what is necessary, and have more fun along the way, and work a little less. That's what I would say.